Oh, okay. I have not had this happen before. It said an error occurred on Facebook. This is usually temporary. Wait a moment and then try again. Let's try again. And now it says we're live. Okay, great. Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. Hello and welcome. I'm going to verify that we are, that we are live. There we go. We are live in the group. Awesome. Hi, everybody. I am here with Julie Ballard. And I want to tell you real quick, I'll give you Julie's official bio here in just a minute, but I just wanted to tell you that it is so cool how God connects people, because the very first time I heard Julie's name was actually when I heard her story for the first time. It was on Sandy Gledhill's podcast, The Fearless Revolution, and I heard your story. And what's interesting is, even before I heard your story, she actually launched right into like who you are and what you do in the beginning. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to know her. I didn't even hear your story. I didn't hear your testimony, but I was like, her publishing stuff sounds awesome. And so I was there. Okay. Yeah, I'm plugged into, I shouldn't be issues here, but all right. Quick reminder while I'm thinking about it. Everybody tag somebody who knows in the group. If you are watching, you might also be watching on YouTube. Anybody who's watching. Oh my gosh, you guys. I have not ever had these three particular issues so far. You know what? In Jesus' name, this is a protected space. This is a space of freedom. This is a space of victory. This is a space this is our territory. And we are stepping deeper into our territory, which is why we are getting some pushback here. But in Jesus' name, we just invite all the tech angels to just clear all the airways. All of the Wi-Fi, all of the internet, make everything smooth in Jesus' name, with technology and any other hindrance, any other obstacle, just be removed right now in the name of Jesus. All right. Thank you, God. Okay. Well, I was just explaining how I knew Julie for anybody who's watching. By the way, give us a comment. Let me know who is here and where you're watching from, and tag some people. All right. So awesome. Well, I know we've got a couple of people watching. We are just having all kinds of fun tech stuff going on, but we are on it. All right. I mean, God's on it. He's got it. Okay. So let me introduce Julie. All right. Julie Ballard is the founder and CEO of Victory Vision Publishing and Consulting, LLC. Her life is a story of tragedy and triumph. She has helped countless visionaries see their dreams come true from concept to completion. After leaving the corporate world of public relations, communications, and marketing, she vowed to serve those who have a story to tell the world, which I know is some people watching right now. Julie currently lives in Colorado Springs, Colorado, with her awesome husband, Jason. She leads bi-weekly women's Bible studies. While hiking 14ers, I think this is supposed to say, because I just realized this didn't all go into my chat where I thought it did. Oh my gosh, you guys, we're just going to crack about it. Is there anything I missed? What else do you want to tell us, Julie?
Oh, no, I think you got it all, my friend. That's fine. We don't hike 14ers every other week. That is for sure. But we hike around the foothills and stuff like that. But.
Awesome. Well, I love hiking. It's actually one of my very favorite things. And I used to do some rock climbing. But that was, believe it or not, before I moved to Alaska, because the rocks we have here are not conducive to rock climbing. So hiking it is, and climbing some mountains. So we've chatted a little bit about that. But where we're going to go today is so the title of our talk today is Rehab, Relapse, Restore. And when you and I were talking leading up to this, one of the things that I just wanted, like one of the things we got to dive into actually was who you are as an intuitive daughter of God. And that really is our primary audience who's joining us today, and a lot of those who are going to watch on replay. So I want to chat a little bit about that, because that was a really fascinating conversation for me. And you're like, I don't really get to talk about this a whole lot.
Yeah. So, when I was growing up, I felt like I was different from everyone else because I was able to really see and discern and feel things deeply on multiple levels. And so it was somewhat dysfunctional in my family. I mean, we had it all together on the outside. My dad was the vice president of the bank, the president of the country club. I mean, we ran in all the, super popular circles in our town. But like life at home was a little strange, and I couldn't quite ever put my finger on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew growing up that I could feel deeply, but I didn't have an outlet for those feelings and no one that I could really, really talk to about it. So, when we would move, my dad was he wasn't all that well, like in his headspace. And so he would move us all the time. Like we would move from one house, and then 2 miles down the road, we would move to another house. And then 2 miles later, a couple years later, we'd move to another house, just all within the same neighborhood pretty much. And I felt like he was trying to run away from whatever it was that was plaguing him at the time. And so in order to cope with that chaotic kind of, pick up and take everything away and move again, my parents knew that it was bothersome to me. And so they would put me in my room, and they would put my room together first. And I had, my peach and green blankets, all of my Cabbage Patch Kids and Care Bears, and my closet perfectly organized. Everything needed to be like in order. And then they would put me in my room and shut the door and go take care of the rest of the moving in the house. And it was just so that I could sit there and either read or draw. A lot of times what I would do is I would like consider what our house looked like from above. And so I would draw the layout of our home, like where every window and every door was, so that I could kind of understand, like, okay, if something were to go wrong, like, where do I go? So it was kind of just my way of coping to, take myself into that place where I could just breathe again, because the chaos was just too much, And then when he went to prison, when I was in the 5th grade, it was, he went to prison for embezzlement, and we lost everything, like our nice house, our nice cars. We moved from one side of the town to the other. And I had to, because I was such a deep feeler, I would just lay on the trampoline and look at the stars, because I didn't know how to manage what I was feeling, what I was thinking. I mean, it was really tragic for such an intuitive little girl, walk through all of these things. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can only imagine like how myself at that age, what that would have been like. And that's such an interesting picture that you have of just like laying there looking at the stars and just trying to process these things that are really completely out of your control. But at the same time, you're also sensing and feeling all of these things from all of these different directions without being able to understand or process them. Did you ever have anybody like it seems like your parents recognized that you did better with comfort and structure, and so they very lovingly, preemptively created this space that felt like a safer space for you. Did you ever have anybody speak to the intuitive part of you or the feeler part of you, or if it was more like, let's just try to make her be able to handle this better, cope with it? And
yeah, nobody really ever spoke into it at all, because I didn't know how to speak it out to explain what was going on. The spiritual experiences I was having at night, the panic attacks that I was having, like such a young age. I would run into my mother's room and I would just go to her, Mom, I mean, I can't even take a breath. I mean, and literally I could just hold my breath forever. And I was like, I'm going to die if I don't breathe. Like, it was just so weird. It was just all of this strange stuff. But, like looking up at the stars and things like that, I just wanted to escape. Like, look at all the vastness out there. Of course, we went to church, but I had zero relationship with God. It was more so religion, so much of that. And, just going and showing up and being there and saying the things and singing the songs, and then you leave and all the guys leave, all the dads would leave early so they could go catch their golf game. And it was just, church was a strange place for me, and I didn't understand the Bible. So I didn't, I knew that I needed to know what it said, but I had no idea what those words on those pages were. I mean, and so I knew that there was something more for me, but I just didn't know how to verbalize it to anyone for them to be able to help me. I just took on the feelings of all the people that were around me and made them my own. I pretty much lived in tragedy from day one because I just didn't know how to manage what I was feeling and sensing, honestly.
Yeah. And I'm curious, those of you who are joining us today, or even on the replay, who else remembers being a child? Because I know I do. I remember being a child. And my mom would actually say things like, "Oh, you're so perceptive." And and so she would kind of acknowledge this part of me that I didn't realize was actually different. I actually thought everybody experienced life the way that I experienced life and processed the way that I processed. And I had things that I did interpret and I even processed in the trauma center of my brain, but it is different than when there is a major trauma going on in your family and you're that young. Yeah. And so just not even knowing like what to do. And of course, adults not knowing what to do. So how did bring us from there forward to the next part of, you were already having panic attacks at such a young age. So then what happened?
Well, I mean, I just started, my parents like to party and have fun. And so they would always have like wine coolers and stuff in the refrigerator. So I started stealing those sometimes, I just wanted to change how I felt. I would drink more NyQuil than I was supposed to when I wasn't feeling well. I mean, just kind of little things like that. And eating disorder started to surface. And, so all these things that when you hold things inside, then they surface in other areas and manifest in ways. And you don't realize that that's what's happening. But, my dad, he got back from prison and was a ghost of a person. And then he committed suicide when I was 15. Unfortunately, I was the last person to see him living and breathing. And so I felt such a huge weight of responsibility and guilt and shame attached to that. Like, what if I had said something different to change his mind before he walked out that door?
And how old did you say you were again when your dad committed suicide?
15. So super impressionable, yes.
Yeah. And you're just at that age where you're not quite at the maturity level that you actually can even separate your personal responsibility, because kids, like, they take things on themselves automatically.
Yeah.
So much.
Yeah. And so, walking through that, I just pretty much any form of God that I thought I knew before that, I just dismissed after that. Yeah. I'm not seen. I am not cared for. He obviously hates me because he keeps allowing these things to happen to me, and so I spent a lot of time, in magnolia trees, reading books. I just always wanted to escape and separate myself from people. So
this is what Deborah says. She says, I remember losing myself in books. I was actually I lost myself in books too. I was very much a bookworm. Yes, show us this one. I love this.
Well, which way do we go? This is my Shel Silverstein book that has somehow made it with me all of these years. It's got my name written in it several times. And my sister's name. And
I love in the attic.
Falling apart, but it was so interesting to me, this book, because there was so much imagination here. And so this book, I don't know how it's made it, because my part of my story, and I'll share this in a minute, but living on the streets, being homeless and addicted, somehow this book always found its way back into my arms. So
I feel like that's such a gift. I feel like it's such a gift that you still have that copy of that book.
yes, it is. I mean, and that's why I have it right here in my office so I can look at it anytime I want and remind myself of how far God's brought me. You know, even through all of the dysfunction and all of the tragedy and all of the things that happened to me, he never left. I did, you know, he never left.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. So, so your dad passes away, and you said what happened after that is you actually tried to function, right? Like as normal as you could.
Yeah, I mean, on the outside, everybody would have thought they had it together. You know what I'm saying? I was, you know, on the dance line in high school. You know, I had a lot of really popular friends. I was making more than straight A's. I mean, I was a super nerdy math geek, part of almost every club that I could possibly be part of in high school. And I mean, I had it together, but my goodness, on the inside, I was just dying, you know?
Yeah.
I wanted love. I wanted validation. I wanted all of these things, and I really wasn't getting it from anywhere. So I was turning to guys to get that, you know, like, you know, being promiscuous, and ended up pregnant at 16 and had an abortion. And then 2 weeks later, I was doing jump splits in front of the homecoming court and pretending like it never happened, you know?
Oh, wow.
So it was just stuffing, constantly stuffing. So it's, you know, smoking marijuana, drinking on the weekends, all of the things that, you know, teenage kids kind of, you know, a lot of teenage kids kind of do. But for me, it was just a means of escape. For other people, it was a means for fun.
Yeah.
And so that carried on through college. I got a full scholarship to the university in my hometown, and I went to college and worked full time while I was there, and I partied like a rock star. You know what I'm saying? So once college was over and all of these people are going to their white picket fence, you know, off into the sunset with their new mates or whatever, I continued on with my death spiral, I would call it, and still managed to get married and have 2 beautiful children and work and all of these things. But I mean, I wasn't prepared for any of it. And so I was just constantly trying to feed the dark part of my heart with the bad things that made it worse. And so it was a deadly cycle, and nobody wakes up and says that they're going to be a full-blown addict and live on the streets and be homeless. I mean, that's not anybody's goal, but that's really where it turned out for me. You know, lost custody of my kids, and ended up just in some really bad places, and I just wanted to die every day.
So when I know this is it's a lot. Your story is a lot to process. So I'm just gonna let's just let that rest for a minute, and I'm gonna recap. Okay, this is the Nanette version. You grew up moving constantly. You were intuitive enough to know even before things blew up with your dad at work, and then he ended up going to prison. Even before that, you knew there's something off, something wrong, that there was pain, that there was this escapism type of thing where it's like, if we keep moving, then something's going to be okay, but it wasn't. And so then your dad goes through, your entire family goes through this really terrible time with him being in prison. And then ultimately he ends up committing suicide when you're 15. And then the downward spiral starts.
Yep.
And it doesn't really stop, but you have a veneer, right? And you have coping mechanisms, and you have something in place where you seem okay.
Yeah.
But really you're not at all okay.
Right.
Was there ever anybody who saw through that and reached out to you, and did you push them away? Or I'm just trying to, I'm curious about that. I'm curious if there was that, or if you were just so good at hiding it.
I think I was just really good at hiding it. You know, obviously, as time progressed, people saw how bad off I was. I mean, I went through rehabs and detoxes and, you know, mental institutions and like all of these things so of course it was obvious to everybody as time progressed, you know what I'm saying? But I don't think anybody really knew how to handle it or what to do. I mean, all they saw was that I was making bad decisions and hurting everyone. So that piled on more guilt and more shame. So,
right.
you know, nobody really knew how to help me. And I mean, I thought the rehabs and stuff were just a joke. And I started learning how to operate the system there so that I could get whatever it was that they had so that I could leave. And just the only reason really that I was there was to get people off of my back. Because I wanted to continue on with I was perfectly okay in my destructive lifestyle. Like, to me, it was like to be able to have these two different personalities, one there for this situation. I mean, I wore whatever mask I needed to wear for whoever I was in front of, whether it was the drug dealer on the street or my parents or you know, mom and stepdad or my sisters or my husband or my kids. I mean, wherever I needed to, whatever mask I needed to wear, that's just the one I put on. You know? But there was comfort somehow in the chaos. Even though chaos was the very thing that I was trying to avoid all my life. And now I was just living it.
Yeah. You went from desiring that structure to then embracing the chaos.
Yeah.
So something you said, I feel like is really important for our intuitive daughters of God. And that's that one of the things you said, one of the things we sometimes say is, oh, I put on a different hat. You said I put on a different mask. Okay. Yeah. And as intuitive daughters of God, one of the really interesting things about us is that we can be very adaptable, that we have the ability to recognize what works in different environments. And so there is this kind of chameleon type of response that we can do, that we can step into pretty easily. And sometimes rather than being multifaceted, we are fragmented. And sometimes rather than we're putting different hats on, we do put different masks on. And sorry, I got this fly buzzing around. At this point in your life, and I don't want to jump too far forward to now, but now you're on the other, you're on the side of restoration. You've been through the process.
Oh yeah.
Do you still find that you're able to embrace the multifaceted part of yourself and the part of yourself that you can put on multiple hats? And was that tough for you to transition from the masks to the hats?
You know, this whole thing has been a process for the past 10 plus years. Like, it is truly a process that I've had to walk through. So it's like, now I do embrace my multifacetedness. I can do a lot of things. I think my thing when I was like walking through chaos was that I could control it. Nobody else. And you're not going to tell me what to do. And I'm going to control this and this is going to be fine. You know what I'm saying? And so it was just a means of being able to control the chaos. It was so weird. You know what I'm saying?
Our brains do weird things. Yeah.
But now today on this side of it and on the restoration side in the 10 plus years that I've been walking through this new life that I'm living, that's, you know, and it hasn't been perfect, but it's all been a process of just like learning who I am, what I stand for, where I'm going, and being okay in my own skin. And not like trying to please people anymore. Like at one point, the Lord said, I just want you to put everything down, because again, it was all chaotic, but I was controlling it. It was all good things, but I put so many things on my plate that it had all become my identity. And so he told me, I don't even want you serving a cup of coffee at church. Like, and I know that I'm way ahead because there's still pieces that we haven't talked about, but you know, I had to find out who I was, through several processes of heart healing and identity and all of those things.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I love your story so much. Draw the bridge really quickly for us. I know really quickly is hard to do. How did you get from going from it like kind of working the system in institutions, in and out of institutions, to then there was an even deeper part of your downward spiral, right?
Yeah. I mean, I had, and I will make this quick. And if anybody that's listening has more questions, I'm more than happy. Like, reach out to me and I'll share deeper with you. But because of time, I want to just say, like, I had 3 failed suicide attempts. I ended up overdosing and taking my last breath in the middle of the street, in the middle of the ghetto of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And that's really where the Lord met me. And he said, no, I'm not done with you yet. And he sent me walking. I didn't even get up off the street. Like, I was just walking down the street again. And I mean, that's miraculous, right?
Yes.
So, through a chain of amazing events and just really hearing the voice of God, like almost audibly for the first time in my life, I was able to leave that lifestyle and walk into a Christ-centered recovery center, which I'd never done before. And he met me there with so much grace and love and acceptance. And, I was so hungry for something different, like, and not to please someone else. I just wanted to live and not die, Yeah. And so I just, I just opened myself up to receive whatever he had for me. And through all of that, I can go into real quickly, like, I went back to a marriage. I was in my second marriage to an addict, and I don't recommend that for anyone because it turned into disaster later on. I mean, I've had, I think, three relapses in 10 years, but I'm finally past that as well. So it's like I was sitting at home watching a television show called The Revolutionary Life with Dustin and Darlene Stanley, and I was so moved because I'd never heard of missionaries before. I never knew that people actually went out and like were a part of the Great Commission, making disciples of all nations, right? I didn't know that was a real thing. And so they were missionaries who had left everything and gone overseas, and they took their camera with them and then became a syndicated show. So I was watching this marathon, and I was just moved. And the Lord said, you're going to reach the world too, but in a different way. Because I was like, I want to go do this. Like, this looks like fun. So Dustin on that show said, that he used to be a pastor at a church in South Mississippi, and that's where I was living. So I started screaming at the television, like, tell me where in South Mississippi, because I wanted to go find them, be their friend. Like, I was just going to go find Dustin and Darlene Stanley and be their friend. And I heard the very familiar voice of the enemy, the one that I had been listening to the majority of my adult life. And it said, sit down and shut up. You'll never be friends with people like that. Wow, Jamie, thank you. Thank you for saying that. And I, so I did. I sat down and I didn't tell anybody. And 3 days later, my new Christian friend, I called her Tracy, she called me up on the phone and she said, hey, I'm doing this worship night and testimony night at this little church. Would you like to come? I was like, yeah, I would love to go. So she picked me up. Well, actually, I drove to her house and we left from there. And we went to this tiny, very charismatic, very Pentecostal, like, church with pews in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the woods in McGee, Mississippi. And
and you're like, oh no, are there snakes? It was good.
Yes, what's going on? I mean, but again, I was just open, whatever. I don't care, whatever you have. Like, I just want to receive from you, Lord. Yeah. So that night, I mean, fire broke down in there. I mean, I'm not even kidding. It was like 4-hour service. People were wailing and travailing and literally running around the room. And there was nobody. I mean, everybody's like doing their own thing. And I felt led to go down the aisle because that's what good Christians do whenever they want to receive from God. So I'm just walking down the aisle and there's nobody down there to meet me. So, because they're all off, like, running around. So I'm standing down there and I have my eyes closed and my hands out. And I said, Lord, I know that you have something for me, and whatever it is, I just say yes. So please let me know what it is that you want me. Like, what do you want? What can I do to serve the people and be part of the kingdom? And all of a sudden the pastor laid hands on me and gave me my very first prophetic word. And he said, 10,000 words are going to come out of your house. And I was like, words, whatever, dude. Like, I had no idea what he was talking about. Well, I mean, that's exactly what's happening now 10 years later. But we left that service and we got in the car. It's like 11 o'clock at night. And Tracy said, I think you're supposed to come to my house. And I was like, I'm not coming to your house. Like, you're 8 months pregnant. Your husband and baby are waiting for you at home. I don't need to come to your house and drink coffee right now. And she was like, Holy Spirit, she had tears streaming down her face. Holy Spirit says, you have to be at my house right now. I was like, well, then we got to go to your house. So we go to her house. And as she's opening her front door, y'all are not even going to believe this. This is 3 days after the devil told me I couldn't be friends with Dustin and Darlene Stanley. And she opened her door. By the way, my friends are in town. And sitting on her couch, people were Dustin and Darlene from the Revolutionary Line. I was like, what? So I literally ran away. I ran. I was like, I went and hid in her garage, and I'm like all down on the ground. I'm like weeping and crying and like, what are you doing, God? This is so intense. What are they doing here? So I finally pulled myself together. I couldn't even stand up. I crawled through her kitchen on all fours. And I crawled up to the man, and I was like, man of God, the devil told me 3 days ago that I couldn't be friends with people like you. And needless to say, we had church that night and till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And Dustin, he started prophesying to me, and he said, look, you have books in you. And I was like, I'm not a writer. Like, I don't even know how to put 2 sentences together. Like, I suck at writing, and I love to read.
Like, I'm the math geek.
Yeah.
I did not join the whatever language club, right?
Yeah. But I wasn't into that. I mean, I don't even tell them. I said, if you could see my journals, it's like a kindergartner wrote them. I mean, like, I'm not into that. I don't want to do that. And he was so intent on me writing that he started a blog for me, like pulled out his computer, paid for it, designed it, and said, here you go. Now all you have to do is go write. And I was like, whatever. So I go home in the hours of the morning, and I started arguing with God. I hadn't slept, right? I had not been to sleep. And I'm sitting there with my computer, and it was sitting on the desk that my dad had written a suicide note on that was in my home. And the Lord said, whatever's about to come out of you is going to break generational curses in your family, but not just your family, everyone's family. And I rolled around on the floor for like 5 hours. Like, I don't know how to do this. And I would sit down at the computer, and I would just scream. I would hit the desk. I mean, I was just so mad. Like, why are you asking me to do this? I don't know how. And so I finally sat on the couch defeated. And the Lord said, I mean, nearly audibly, he said, Julie, do you see that yellow pillow? I said, yes. He said, can you describe it to me as if I were blind? And I was like, Lord, I can't even imagine you blind, but yes. So half an hour explaining this pillow to him, like in great detail. And he said, that's exactly it. He said, now I want you to tell your story to the world as if they are blind. Because and I started writing, and I haven't stopped. So, of course, there's been tragedy. There's been heartbreak. There's been more healing. There's been, all of these things. But the Lord just kept pouring in and pouring in and pouring in no matter what. And when I would find myself back at the dope house, like, I'm back in God's bad graces. Like, he doesn't want to have anything to do with me anymore because I'm a failure. I failed at this. And, he's had to really deal with me on how to get past failure and how to get past, like, thinking he's never going to let me down. Never.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That, something about what you just said, that you are somebody who has had to, he's walked you. Okay. So he walked you through learning how to write step by step. And he's walked you through learning how to deal with feelings of being a failure.
Yeah.
And that is something like that skill. I mean, seriously, that skill. That was one. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I was like, God actually, like, he did that with me. He has walked me through, because I can sit here and tell you that this whole last summer, I was still dealing with like a whole new level of being stretched and dealing with feeling like I'm back in this place of my fuse being so short that I'm flipping to rage against, and it's coming out against my children. And I'm like, haven't I already been through, like, I broke this stuff off. I went through this level of dealing with it, and here I am again, And so I know some people may be like, well, I can't really relate to being an addict and going through relapses. Yes, you can, actually.
Yeah.
You can relate. It just may not look the same. I can relate because my default button that gets hit when I'm not okay and I've tried too hard, and then my trying hard hasn't worked. And then I just have nothing else. And I feel like God's not really meeting me, even though that's not quite accurate, but like that's how I feel. My default button gets hit, and I go to this place where I have a short fuse, high anxiety, and I flip to rage. Like that's been my default button. And God has been talking to me about like, we actually are going to recalibrate your entire default.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly what he has to do. Like, but we have to let him, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? And that's the thing. And that's not always easy for us intuitive people who like to control situations around us, right? Like, do I really want to give this to God? I don't know if I can. You know,
Yeah.
there's still pieces of me that he's still trying to be like, can you just let me have that? Will you just let me have it and have my way with it? You know, and so that's kind of, but you know, we are never going to really arrive. We're just here to, like, what I went through is healing for other people. Like, so when we tell our story, or when we, you know, give, like, talk about it, you know, we break those things off by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. That's where resurrection comes from. And so, and that's how we defeat the enemy. So the more we talk about it, then the more healing that comes. And so I realized, like, I can't hide behind this anymore. In fact, you know, my stepdad once told me, he was like, I was moving from one place to another. He said, whenever you move there, just don't tell anybody. I was like, I can't not tell people where I've been, because it may be the breakthrough that somebody needs, you know, because again, I'm still a work in progress. I think we all are. So we can't like beat ourselves up over the head with the Bible and tell ourselves how crappy we are just because we made a bad mistake or a bad decision. I mean, we just have to keep moving forward and trust that God has a plan. He's never going to let us down. I mean, I can say that 1,000 times. Like, he was with me everywhere. Like, from the womb to now, he never left me, ever.
Yeah.
He was not angry with me when I was on the street. He was not mad at me when I was putting needles in my arm. He wasn't. He did not despise me. He still looked upon me with love. And so when I consider that, then that changes how I think about myself. And it changes how I interact with other people.
Well, now I'm crying. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Like, it's what I do. Oh, that's so true. And it's so good. You know, it's literally everything boils down to knowing him, not knowing about him.
Yeah.
Like knowing the truth of who he really is and what his heart really is.
Yeah.
And as intuitive daughters of God, we actually carry the heart of the Father. Like we have this ability to connect and communicate and to be a conduit of that.
Yeah. And
the enemy would love to stop us from being able to do that. And so he uses trauma.
100%. You know, I mean, that's the one thing, like, but I don't think trauma is different for everybody. Somebody may tell you something that doesn't rest with your spirit, and that could be traumatic for you. Somebody could gossip about you behind your back, and that could induce trauma, you know, like somebody could have been sexually trafficked, and that of course is going to produce trauma. I mean, everybody's trauma looks different, and what may not be traumatic for me may very well be traumatic for you. So I feel like as intuitive daughters of God, we just have to walk around with a whole lot of compassion for where people are and what they're going through, you know, and the situations that are coming up in people's lives, you know, and just realize that because we can feel and see and hear the things that are happening within people, whether they verbally express it or not, you know, how do we help them navigate through that with love and compassion? And that's really what it's all about.
Definitely. Okay. So we've touched on a little bit, like the importance of having grace on ourselves, which allows us to have grace on others. And that really, I think we have to be willing to embrace that we are our all-in process. And that's true of ourselves. That's true of others. One of the things that God's been sharing with me and kind of showing me new layers of this is that there have been areas where of my life where I've just like not been gracious with myself, not been kind to myself, and not willing to love myself. Like I have had the tendency to be so hard on myself. And then I think it's a good thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the truth is, I'm a woman of excellence and I do have high standards. But the problem is when I come under stress, not only am I critical of myself, but that will spill out to the people around me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think I'm this gracious person. I do tend to be gracious to other people. But when my default setting is to not be gracious with me, then that will become me not being gracious with other people too.
Oh yeah. I mean, and that's, I will work myself till 2 a.m. You know what I'm saying? I will put everything else aside and give everything that I have to everyone else and forget about me. Mm-hmm. And that's what induces stress for me, and fear and insecurity, and all of those things start to pop up their little ugly heads, right? And so what I've had to do is like, yes, do I lead this bi-weekly Bible study on every other Wednesday? Yes, I do. And because guess what? If I wasn't leading it, I wouldn't show up. I would find an excuse to not go. And so I was like, well, I have to do something that's going to make me get out of my house and go do something, and just enjoy nature and get out. And that is my rest. Like, that's one of the reasons we moved to Colorado, was because of the nature. And I've just been stuck in my house, still working and not enjoying it. So now I force myself in that way to get out and go do those things, because that's how I rest. So I'm recalibrating myself that, hey, it is okay for you to step away and to like be all like, I'm off grid. Like, there's no phone internet, there's no nothing. And I love it. I make sure I go to places that I don't have any service, so that I'm not checking my email or messages or anything like that. And so it's just it's allowing myself to teach myself that it's okay to have those moments, even in the middle of the week, to go do something good for me. Yeah. It's not necessarily about the other people, but I knew that if I didn't at least say that I need to lead this thing, I knew I wouldn't show up. I know me, right?
Yeah.
So I have to have those things. And I mean, that's how we have to do with a lot of things in our lives. Like, we can't just, like, it's a work, like we said, we're a work in progress. And if I'm going to be overstressed and arguing with my husband and forgetting to make him dinner one night because I'm too busy, I don't want those things. And so now I allow myself to sleep in the mornings. That's something new for me too. Like, I'm teaching myself these new things and recalibrating my mind to say that it's okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I love that. That's so healthy. It's so healthy. Yeah. So speaking of healthy, the last thing I want to talk about, because, I'm actually going to share a link, because I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about your story, because we really skimmed over some of it and then highlighted certain parts and then skimmed and then highlighted. And there's so much there. But there's actually there's a podcast episode that you did last month, I think, that you really went in depth into your story. And I'm going to post the link to that in the comments or description or something, so that people can access that and actually hear the rest of your story. What I want to close with, because our time's wrapping up here, is I want you to tell us what it was. And you hit on it with rest, okay? Because I know that when I asked you, that was your short answer, okay? But tell us about that shift, that when you went from, it was your last relapse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And more was at stake in some ways than ever before.
Yeah.
And I asked you, what was it that changed things? And I would love to hear that part of your story to close.
Yeah. So my last relapse was right after I got married. It was 8 months after I got married to my awesome husband. Like, he's so amazing and such a godly man. And he was ready to leave me, and he literally dropped me off at the door of another institution, I would call it, and said, good luck. I'm done. But the thing that took place was like, I had to just say, even if everything falls apart, even if I lose everything again, like, can I still be okay being me? And I had to let the Lord answer that question for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so he took me away. And a lot of it was because I was doing, and not being. Right. And so I was doing all of these things that had become my identity. And so I needed to know who Julie was. So after that, of course, I had got suitable employment. I got a really amazing job at all of these things. But, and I never wanted to go back into writing or publishing, because I'd been publishing before as kind of a side gig, a hobby or whatever for friends and family and things like that. But I never thought I would go back into that again. And again, I started doing. But during that time, like he said, look, can you just not do anything? Can you just go to work and come home? Can you just do that? Can you just do that? Can you just do that? And that's when I realized that I actually enjoyed being, like, being who I was, like being a wife, being, accepted by me, validated by me, loved by me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't have to constantly please other people to get that anymore.
Yeah.
I didn't have to do that anymore. And so I'm like, he just sat me down. I want you to throw everything that you've ever written away, delete the blog, take all your books off of Amazon. Like, I'm going to do a new thing in you. And through that process, over those 3 years, almost 4 years since that last relapse, like, it's been, now when he brought the publishing back to me and said, I want you to do this full time for people. And I quit my super lucrative, high paying job in the middle of the global pandemic and launched Victory Vision. Crazy. Well, who does that? But he told me, he said, now
a shocking number of people I know, actually, but that's because we're cut from that kind of a cloth, I guess.
But that's what he said. Now that you know who you are, that you are victorious, that you live from this place of righteousness, that your sins are counted no more.
Yeah.
That you don't have to please people to be who you are and to get validation, because you know how to do that through me and through yourself now, and that you love yourself. Now I want to give this back to you, and now I want to blow all my favor upon it, and just bring you back into this place of wholeness and peace. And that's where I'm at today.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I think that that's so important, because this is a group where, sometimes we talk about we're passionate and we have a purpose and we want to do the thing. We want to know, like, okay, what's my assignment right now? And we talk about these things. Yeah. But there's actually, there is a process. There's healing.
Yes.
And really learning to walk in freedom. There's identity, which is so important. If your heart is not healed, and if you do not know who you really are, and especially, and I'm about to say something that is a little countercultural right now. If you are in a mindset where your goal is to create yourself or recreate yourself, you are not actually walking the path of identity and healing. You're skipping over something and you're entering into a striving space, whether you know it or not.
Oh yeah.
And so the truth is, you don't have to create yourself. You do get to discover yourself, because God, you were actually conceived and just created and crafted in the heart of a loving Father who made you multifaceted, who made you with all these different reflections and colors and all the beautiful parts of you, all of these amazing gifts. And he did it for a purpose. But he wants you to be whole before you walk a road that is going to be hard, that is going to have a lot of pressure to it, okay? There's a certain amount of wholeness you have to have before you step into the assignment and really the destiny that God has placed at your core.
Yeah, Nanette, that is so good. And sometimes your assignment is healing, wholeness, wellness.
Yes.
That is your assignment.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. To be, when God was like, rest and be, that was your assignment.
Yep.
And it didn't mean that was the end all to your destiny. You still had something, but that assignment for right then, that was what you had to have. You couldn't skip over it.
Right.
You had tried to skip over it because you didn't really know how valuable it was or that it was that important, right? We do that. We're like, hey, I can just do this. Well, that's not that will land you where you don't want to be, and then you'll rest.
Yes, and you'll be forced to rest.
Forced to rest. Yes, he makes me lie down in green pastures, doesn't he? Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Look, I honor you, Nanette. I'm just so grateful for what you're doing and building the kingdom this way and helping the daughters of God just really find out who they are and where they're going. And you do it with so much love and grace and compassion. And so I just honor you and just continued prayers for you and your journey and your mission and all of those things. I'm just grateful to be your friend.
Oh, thank you so much. I love you so much. And I am so blessed and so honored that you came on here today to share your story with us and your wisdom with us. And anybody who is considering, like several of you know you have a book in you, all right? What Victory Vision does and what Julie does, and she has a team she works with as well. They have a totally different approach. They have what I like to call the third option. So it's not just wing it yourself, and it's not like go through the crazy process you have to go through to actually get your book accepted somewhere and published. It's actually getting the support that you need in the self-publishing process. So I hope I said that okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. So those of you who have a book in you and you know who you are, and some of you have friends and you know who they are, share this, victoryvision.org. And I will also, I think this is Adrian, because I saw you made a comment earlier about that. Yes. Absolutely. I'm so thankful. And I'm going to actually, here's my little side gift to you. I know you have company coming over. I'm going to put you, I have in our guide section of this group, we have a resources list, and I'm going to make sure that you are in our resources list.
That's sweet. Thank you, Nanette. That's so amazing. I appreciate that.
Well, we appreciate you too. God's doing something awesome with you and with Victory Vision, and meeting a real need. So
yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate all the comments. And you guys, if you do go to that website, that podcast that she was just mentioning is on the About Me section. So you can go listen to it there. And you can get all the deets on all the things that we skipped over.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you all for joining us. Love you all. Getting lots of thank yous, and I'm not going to get to all of them, but thank you all so much. All right. Love you. Have a good one. See you next time. Bye.